All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our special education presentation tonight, which is all about inclusion and how we include students here in Radnor. With me tonight is Kara Miller. She is our special education coordinator. Kara, are you there?
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight.
All right. And Jenny Lesage is dealing with personal matters, so she apologizes. She cannot join tonight, but it'll be Kara and I tag teaming as we move through. As I mentioned to you before we got started, if you have your chat box open, feel free to put questions in there. We do ask that your questions are more general in nature and not specific to your student, your child. Any of those questions should be directed to your case manager, all right? And we will answer some questions at the end if we have time, but most likely most of them will be answered in a Q&A format after we post it. So as we go through tonight, Kara and I will tag team and we'll get started. All right, so objectives for tonight, what we were hoping to accomplish is a couple things. First, we're going to review some legal requirements, which our Department of Special Education is required to follow as it relates to IDEA and LRE. All right, so we'll go through those first in the first couple slides. Next, we want you to have an understanding of the supports available in Radnor, and that will be in 3 areas that we're going to cover tonight: academics, behavior, and a big one this past year, of course, previously, but especially since COVID hit, is technology and how that relates to inclusion of special education students in the district. Next, we're going to provide some specific examples of what meaningful inclusion is based on individual needs. And that is actually going to be specific to those 3 areas: academics, behavior, and technology. We're going to give some examples of specific student needs. And then lastly, we're going to review supports available on the Radnor continuum of special education supports and services. And I do want to thank our Radnor Committee for Special Education. There was an inclusion series put together, presented this year, and we wanted to follow up on that and talk specifically about Radnor. I know there was partnered with a couple surrounding districts, so I do want to thank the Radnor Committee for Special Education for providing that to our community and parents. All right, so first let's talk about inclusion and Chapter 14. So if you're not aware, the federal law is IDEA and all states must follow special education laws as it pertains to IDEA. Pennsylvania, each state then has their own set of laws related to that, and Pennsylvania's falls under Chapter 14. So when we talk tonight about Chapter 14, it refers to special education. Inclusion is a term that I'm sure you've heard of broadly, talked about in probably many of your meetings, IEP meetings, as well as other presentations you may have heard. But there is some legal background related to inclusion and our obligation as a district to include students in the regular education classroom to the maximum extent possible. I'm going to do a brief overview of some of the big federal cases that are related to inclusion and how that impacts our supports and services in Radnor. First and foremost, LRE and Chapter 14 regulations require us to the maximum extent appropriate to include students in the regular education classroom. That is a very general, very broad statement. And of course, that specific to your students' needs relates to those decisions made in those IEP meetings, and of course, all the services and supports that would go along with each of those needs for us to support your child in the classroom. And that is participation with non-disabled peers, right? So that is how the law is written. There's a couple big cases then that have to do with inclusion. The first one we're going to review quickly is Andrew F., which was in 2016. And this case was about obligation under IDEA and some changes to it, which a school district must follow. And what it has to relate to is the IEP calculating how much a child should make progress on their goals, right? So previously there was a bar that was set a little lower, and the Andrew F. case, basically the gist of it was that we need to have reasonable calculation to enable a child to make progress on goals. And as we go through tonight, as I discuss some of those supports, it means that the supports and services related to those needs must be appropriate to the child and of course included throughout the day. Another case related to inclusion is O'Berty, which was 1993, and that established that if placement outside the classroom is necessary, which sometimes it is, the school district must include a child in as many school programs with children who do not have disabilities. And that is that term to the maximum extent appropriate, which again, you'll hear throughout tonight's presentation. And the last case was Gaskins in 1994, which sought to increase the number of children with disabilities educated with their non-disabled peers, and schools should provide supports for inclusion to work as required by IDEA. This lawsuit sought to change PA system for training districts in inclusion, and we're going to talk a little bit about tonight about some of those trainings that have been conducted over the most recently a couple years, and how we support with some consultants in the area of inclusion. This next slide is it's called the Special Education Data Report, and this is put out every year. It's on PDE's website. You can Google it. And what it does is it goes over the statistics for all school districts and then relates it to the state average. First and foremost, Radnor is above the state average as it relates to students placed as itinerant. And we're going to get into itinerant supplemental and full-time placements in just a second, but itinerant means that a child is included more in the regular education classroom than they are pulled out. And it's a percentage of the day that's determined in that calculation. In Radnor, we're very proud that we're able to offer a multitude of supports and services that enables those students to have meaningful inclusion, not just in the classroom, but meaningfully participating in the curriculum in that classroom. All right, so on the next slide, then we're going to compare it a little bit to the surrounding districts. So as I mentioned, Radnor has a high percentage of students who are itinerant, and our exact percentage you'll see there is from last year's data is 80.5%. So 80.5% of our special education students are included more than 80% of the day in the regular education classroom. Right? Our supplemental percentage is around 19.5%, and as of now, we have 0 full-time students. Another term for full-time, sometimes classrooms, is called self-contained, which we do not have here in Radnor. As you look at some of the surrounding districts, you will notice that with the exception of Garnet Valley, we are higher. And again, we're very proud of that for itinerant level services, which again means they're included in the majority of the day with regular education students. The percentages to the right there is what I just mentioned on the previous slide. More than 80% is considered itinerant, 79 to 20 is supplemental, and then less than 20 is full-time. Again, those are decisions that are made as IEP teams, but as we go through tonight, hopefully you can gain a sense of some of those supports and services in those different areas. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Kara next. We're going to go through the 3 areas, academics first, and then behavior and technology. And as we go through this, we're first going to talk about the supports in each of these areas that we have in Radnor. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to go through some specific examples of student needs, goals that are related, and then some of those accommodations and modifications, which are known as SDI, or specially designed instruction. Kara?
Okay. Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. So yes, if you look at the academic part of this presentation tonight, there are 3 areas that we are able to support our staff and our students in terms of academics. So in terms of staffing, we are able to have learning support teachers that are in each of all of our buildings, all 5 schools that we have in Radnor. Let me just move this over here. And these are our teachers that will typically, they are the teachers that are the case manager to your children, who oversee the IEP, implement the IEP, and work as the case manager, bringing the teams together in the building to ensure the inclusion that your child is receiving, the supports that they need. One of the things that I'd like to say about our staff is that they are also a support system for all of our teachers in the building, our regular education staff, even our building administrators. These are the expertise in the area of special ed, IEP writing. We are able to provide ongoing training for them throughout the school year. We always have an open door policy for them, but this year with COVID and restrictions in getting into the buildings, we were able to have open Zoom sessions where we were able to have Q&A for our teachers to just be able to call and ask for support. So that was something that was really nice for us to do, considering we couldn't be in all of the buildings. We also have academic instructional coaches. These are coaches that are going to really focus on the curriculum and, again, support our learning support teachers, our regular ed teachers, to differentiate the instruction. We have reading specialists that will focus just on reading instruction. Again, and they will support our staff along with our students and our parents. We've been able to have an inclusion consultant that we have been able to bring into some of our IEP teams. I had the opportunity to work with a lot of teams this school year, along with our inclusion consultant. And she was able to look at the alternate eligible content, sorry, that was a mouthful, and be able to align it with our standards and our curriculum for our staff. And one of the things that we were able to do was bring this consultant onto our teams. She wasn't able to come into our buildings, but I was able to go into the buildings, observe our students, and see what needs we needed to have, be able to support the teachers, look at the layout of the classroom, look at the curriculum and specific IEP. So that was a really nice support that we were able to give to our staff, which then helps our children. And then the position that we started this year, which is my position. I've been fortunate. I've been able to be a special education teacher for the last 18 years as a classroom teacher. I taught elementary, middle school, and secondary. My most recent position was at the high school as an emotional support teacher, but I have taught learning support, autistic support, and dabbled in early intervention. So it's been a really great year to support our staff. And I've met a lot of families and have been part of a lot of IEP teams. And I've been able to be that layer of support for our special education teachers, especially during this year. We also have programs, our core instruction that we are able to differentiate. We also have supplemental and replacement instructional programs. So if you have a student that has a math need, you know, they are instructed with our regular education curriculum, but they also would be able to receive a replacement math program that could focus on the skills that they need that may be outlined in their IEP. We also use various programs for progress monitoring. We started a new tool called FastBridge this year. Teachers were trained in this program on how to look at baseline data and track student growth to write the IEPs and to know where the students are for their instructional levels. And we also have various program materials with online components, again, that give us the data and the growth and the progress that we need to support our students. And again, back to supporting our staff on how to program and educate our children. Next slide. Okay, this over here. So here is an academic example. If you're familiar with an IEP, you know that we have different parts of the IEP. And one is that we have a section where we list our needs and we list our students' strengths. Well, anytime we have a need, we have to have a goal to support that need, to know where we are trying to improve that student's area. And then we have our SDI, our special design instruction. That's the last part of the IEP. It really wraps up the whole program that we have for our children. So if you were to look at a student that needs a functional reading skill, we would have a goal that would be specific to your child. Again, this would be something that would be written by the learning support teacher, by the case manager, working together with the regular education teacher to support that inclusion and work as a team. So if we were to look at a goal where we want a student to be able to read across all content areas and to make real life connections and make it functional, okay, we would have these different parts of special design instruction to support that. First, we would have the program that we would be using, and then we would have these modifications and accommodations to support that goal and that need. The goal is listed up there. We would measure it again by a percentage. We would have a baseline, and then we would progress monitor it over a period of time. When we are progress monitoring as special education teachers, that really drives where we're going. And I remember being in the classroom and looking at my data, and that would sometimes drive what I was doing the next week with my instruction. So that's where we really look and see how our student is doing. And again, how can the student be included when we have these goals? If you look at the SDI, special design instruction, these are some examples that could support that. offering social cues, modeling text features. That could be during read aloud. That would be even in small group, utilizing the AAC devices, the communication devices that some of our children have for some of those questions, allowing students to have wait time and being even specific for how much wait time there is, offering choices, giving direct instruction with various reading programs that we have that we'll talk about later tonight, visual clues, cues, and then grade level text modified. So again, when we have a list of these SDIs, this is what is given to all of our teachers that are part of that IEP team. They have a list of what they are required to do throughout their day. And one of the things that I try to encourage teachers to do is when they're reviewing the IEP with their teacher, really go through the SDI section so they understand what each child needs to ensure the inclusion in their classroom. Next slide. So that covered the academic. We also have behavioral support through Radnor Township School District. In our buildings, we have emotional support teachers that are trained in social emotional learning. They are trained in how to support students with behavioral needs, and again, how to support our teachers to include our students with some of these needs. We have BCBAs, Board Certified Behavior Analysis, that we contract with. They allow us to look at the behavior and look at your students' needs in a more in-depth way. They understand behavior. They allow us to write the plans to, again, include our students. We also have registered behavior technicians. Again, these are adults that have more of area expertise in behavior. As a teacher, you're trying to juggle so many different things throughout the day with academic and the social emotional and the behavior that we need the support, even as special ed teachers. So that's why we are able to support with these expertise. We also have personal care assistants. This is for specific needs for our students. Throughout the day, our students have access to paras. That could be for instructional, that can be for behavior. Last year, we started something new through Lakeside. It's a counseling service that we offer in our building. As a former emotional support teacher, last year, we were able to implement counseling throughout the school day. And I always say, as an emotional support teacher, some of the problems or area of needs that we're seeing is beyond a special ed teacher in terms of mental health. We know it's a crisis across the country. We know it's something statewide, and especially during COVID, we are seeing some of our students and faculty really struggle with mental health. So when we provide Lakeside counselors, it supports the students, supports the teachers and the family. So we've had 2 successful years with the counselors coming into our schools. And of course, we have our school counselors that are trained and receive professional development in social, emotional, in behavior as well, but coming together as a team to support our staff and students. Some of the programs that we have K-12 for social emotional learning is Positive Action. It will be teaching students how to use strategies to understand what triggers they may have and to be able to function within the school day. We were able to teach that kindergarten through 12. We have that program, so it's a continuum of services. We also have social thinking. We have the SMARTS curriculum, which is executive functioning, again, to support behavior, and our various course offerings throughout the district. Again, we use our progress monitoring. We're looking at behavior tracking. We're looking at our data. We're looking at our behavior plans to support where our instruction needs to go in the area of social emotional. Next slide. So this would be an example of our behavior, okay? Again, in the IEP, we would have the identified need, which would be social skills. And when we have the need, we have the goal. So with a goal like this, we have a student that maybe is not understanding how to identify a challenging situation and how to work through it. So this would be a goal that the whole team would be looking at. You would have the special education teacher monitoring it and giving direct instruction in these coping strategies. And again, progress monitoring and checking that data. So in this particular goal, we want the child to identify their need and choose that strategy. SDI, again, at the end of the IEP, the list of accommodations and modifications, these would be some SDIs that would be included if a child has a behavioral need. Use of fading prompting, so starting them off with a lot of prompting and then pulling back in terms of helping them so that they can self-reflect, allowing them to have this support in the least restrictive environment, so in the regular education classroom as well, and giving them time where they can self-reflect after we are tracking the data. We would implement a positive behavior support plan. This would be a plan that the team would have access to. This would be identifying the triggers and being able to de-escalate a student and help them, and again, help them to reflect. Another SDI would be additional adult support. This could be our Lakeside counselors. This could be paras in the classroom. This could be checking in with the school counselor each day. And again, offering frequent breaks. So seeing when a child may need a break, come back to a task and return ready to be included and learn.
Thank you, Kara.
Okay.
And the last area we're going to talk about, and then we're going to talk about how we do all of this, some of our specific supports, is technology. As you are well aware, and in working with your students, specifically when COVID hit, and as you move to one-to-one for students, technology is a crucial piece of a student's education today. It was before COVID, but as we're all aware, we have used it. We've brought in the use of it in our buildings. With that said, Radnor is very lucky to have a team put together prior to COVID, or actually as COVID was hitting, but in a wonderful team that supports our students, our staff, and the community as we need to access those technology devices. So there's some specific staff that we want to point out. Our Assistant Director of Instructional Technology, Virginia Glatzer, is new to our district last year, and she has been a crucial piece of our teams as we implement some of these technology resources. And we're going to talk about specifically in the next slide some of those processes that she helps us implement. We have building level technicians in our buildings that support the day-to-day, working directly with students as needed on their devices, working with our special education teachers on any devices beyond our one-to-ones, any applications that we need downloaded and used on those devices. Those building level technicians are a wonderful resource. We also have instructional and technology coaches, which support more of that instructional side, things like the applications and how teachers can use the technology resources to help modify curriculum and support students who may need those pieces in order to be included more meaningfully in the classroom. And then we do continue to use the DCIU consultants. We've used Rebecca Kelly for many years, and she helps us with the formal set frameworks that are completed sometimes when students need additional support in order to be included more in the classroom. There's a multitude of supports that go along with the SET process that can be identified. Specific programs then, this year we started, since we have a Radnor team, we revamped our SET process just a little bit. And we actually have what's called a SET consult. All of this is within the SET process and framework, but we first start with a SET consult, and that is using the staff that I just named above. Not yet the IU consultant, but we use Virginia, her building level technicians, and our coaches, instructional technology coaches, to support our teams as they work through your individual students' needs and identify any additional resources that may be needed. It's been a wonderful process that's really helped us this year. We do have one-to-ones, as you're aware, for each of our students. And if a special education student needs a specific device, then we certainly would get that as part of that process. Monitoring, we do observe the students, their use of the devices, and coach them as they're learning the specific device or application. We consult with specialists. We've had, like I said, Rebecca Kelly and other specialists come in to support implementing, a specific device. And then, of course, goals specific to assistive technology and some of those communication plans that some students have. Okay. What I will say is that this section has, you'll be hearing more on technology and assistive technology for special education, because we didn't always in education have access to this many devices, this many applications, this many technology resources. So as part of the everyday curriculum in Radnor, as you're aware, we do use technology. As it relates to the IEP and special education students, if it's beyond that, then we're getting into some of those processes that I just described. assistive technology has definitely changed over the years. All right, so let's talk about an example. One example that may be identified in your child's IEP, if it's an area of need, would be to improve communication skills. Right? A goal that may align to that need would be during structured language opportunities, the student would make requests or provide basic information using 2 and 3 word phrases via multimodal communication method. And that is using some of the high-tech devices, such as an iPad, Chromebook, laptop, or low-tech communication devices, sign language, verbalization. And of course, there's a percentage tied to that. Specific to technology, we've worked a great deal with our teams this year and working closely with the technology department to broaden our accommodations, our especially designed instruction that is used in the classroom. As you are aware, all of our teachers went through a multitude of professional development when COVID hit. We always had technology resources at our fingertips, but as I mentioned, it greatly expanded when COVID hit. So we spent a great deal of time training all of our staff on the use of those devices. However, for special education students, it goes beyond that. If a student is in need, has these specific needs and is in need of something additional, you may have accommodations in the IEP that are listed here, such as access to the AAC device across the school setting, speech to text during writing, electronic graphic organizers, submission of assignments online, prompting on use of those learned communication skills. As I mentioned, the SET framework, and that is an ongoing process, or the SET console with our own staff, or modified coursework. What Kara and I went over for these 3 examples is not an exhaustive list. I'm sure you're aware, and certainly IEP teams are able to add any accommodations that is needed, any device, any app through that process. All right, so those are the 3 areas that we wanted to discuss related to inclusion. Now, how does that impact how we include students here at Radnor? Well, as I mentioned in one of the initial slides related to federal law in Chapter 14, we are bound by what's called LRE, or least restrictive environment. And what that means is that we need to, as required by law, include students to the maximum extent appropriate with non-disabled peers. All right. When we look at the students' needs, we also need to look at, if they are included or when they are included in the classroom, what supplemental aids and services may be needed in order for them to be successful. So we're not just looking at the students' needs and determining that a child needs, to be pulled out and receive a replacement program. We're obligated to first look at the regular education classroom and how we can support through some of those aids and services that we've already described. And again, not an exhaustive list, but how we can meaningfully include that student. All right. It is the goal of Radnor, and I think that is apparent in some of the data points that we initially went over in the first couple of slides. It is the goal of Radnor IEP teams to include their students in the LRE to the maximum extent possible. They are IEP team decisions, and of course, as a parent, you are a crucial member of that team. I would be remiss to say that all students, it's appropriate for all students to be in a class, 100% of the time. As you know, there are specific needs and specific times where we do request, we do recommend that a child is pulled to receive those services. And that is to implement a multitude of programs in the district that we have, things like Read 180, System 44, Lyndon Mubel, Wilson, the list goes on. All right, we're gonna spend just a little bit more time talking about now. That was some examples of the what and the why, but how do we do that? All right, and a lot of this is in conjunction with Sharon Leonard, who's our inclusion consultant, who has spent many years now, over the past few years, training our teams on what is called meaningful inclusion. It is not okay just to have a student sit in a regular education classroom, a special education student just sit in the classroom. They need to be a participant in the classroom. So as Sharon worked with our teams over the years, and what she's taught us, and working with Kara as well, is that there's 3 components of meaningful inclusion. That is membership, participation, and learning. And as we work with our teams, our IEP teams, and as she works with them further to train and to implement some of these plans, we need to keep these 3 things in mind. Membership is the first one. And this means that the students are a part of the community and assigned to a class. So this is the very minimum that we look at in terms of inclusion. Homeroom at minimum is the requirement, or kind of meets that criteria for membership, right? Each student then is accounted for by a regular education teacher with support of the special education teacher. So because our special education students are included in a multitude of regular education classrooms, we need our special education case managers, those teachers, to be consultants for them to work with those regular education teachers to support meaningful inclusion in the classroom. And those are things like we described: modification to curriculum, use of a small group instruction, progress monitoring, things like that. All right. The next thing then is participation. So the students are active members of the classroom and learning. They're not just passive participants or observers. So oftentimes inclusion is thought of, as I mentioned, in just a student sitting in the classroom. They may be hearing the instruction, and terms that have been thrown around, previously are, they're getting the standards-based instruction, they're getting exposure, right? Those terms are outdated. Right. What we need now to focus on, and what we have focused on and will continue to focus on, is the students being active members of that class. And we're going to talk on the next slide of how that's accomplished, more specifically with some of the curriculum. But the students, again, are not just sitting in there. They're not passive. They're not just sitting alongside of the students. They're engaged, right? They're active members. And students, part of participation is that students are grouped with other students to support learning. Heterogeneous groupings are a must. Long are the days when we are grouping students according to levels or needs, which are homogeneous groups. We really need to make sure that our groupings are heterogeneous. We're pairing students with more needs with model students that can support them, because we know students learn from other students across the school day. And the last section is learning. Students are learning the same standards as other students, right? In previous years, even as I was a teacher, and Kara, I'm sure, could speak on it, oftentimes we would just teach a lower level curriculum or lower level material. While your student may be functioning at a lower level, their instructional level may be lower, they're still learning the same standards. Right? And Sharon Leonard, on the next slide, I'm going to talk about a little bit, but Sharon Leonard has trained our teams on how to modify that curriculum, even for our students with the most complex needs. And then what I'm going to talk about next is called the alternate eligible content. And that can be utilized when deemed appropriate for those students with more significant needs. All right, so what is the AEC? AEC stands for alternate eligible content. This, by the way, this will be posted, so you'll have access to this link here. And I would encourage you to open it up and read more about alternate eligible content. But alternate eligible content includes assessment anchors, as one of the tools that we use, Pennsylvania Department of Ed requires us to use for our curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And what the alternate eligible content does is it looks at the anchors on grade level content and helps our teachers modify the curriculum down to basic levels, basic standards levels that they would need to accomplish. So an example may be for multiplication, students learning multiplication, they would work on groupings of numbers, right? Learning patterns. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 groups of 2 equal 4. Whereas students, standards-based instruction, grade level content may be learning a long division method. So the students have access, they're learning the same standards, but they're learning it a different way. And those assessment anchors are really important for students who are included in the regular education classroom, because again, they're not just sitting in there hearing it or having exposure to it, they're learning. They're learning through the same standards-based instruction. Alternate eligible content is designed for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, and those students typically are eligible for the PASA, which is the Pennsylvania Alternate System of Assessment. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Kara. 1 second. I have you on auto mute, so I know she can mute herself. Give me 1 second. There we go.
Thank you. I was having a tickle in my throat. So the next slide has to talk about our supports with social emotional. We talked about earlier about how we support our students in the regular education with behavior and social emotional needs, but the further supports that we have is again, our learning support teachers that will embed the social skills instruction into the day. We have our emotional support teachers, again, supporting our students, supporting you as parents with strategies to work with your child, and again, with the staff. We also have our direct social emotional support in terms of our instruction. We were talking about our positive action earlier, our executive functioning programs that we have, our SMARTS curriculum, giving the students time to work on those needs that we have addressed in the IEP. We also have various course offerings at Radnor Middle School and at Radnor High School that meet social emotional needs and supports that they're at times offered to all of our students, but we have specific direct instruction at the middle school and the high school at the secondary level to support those needs. We also have our SAT process. That is our student assistant program. That is a statewide program that we have. Every school district has it. That is where a team of teachers in all of our buildings, K to 12, meet as a team weekly and look at students that may be having any academic needs, social, emotional, mental health, in our secondary level, drug and alcohol. So we have these team of teachers that meet each week. We have a referral process that allows the team to identify students that need support, and again, identify supports for you in the community as a family. We have our school counseling support, K to 12. We have our social worker support that really works with the community, all of our outside services, our attendance programs that we need to implement to help you and all of our students. Again, we have our Lakeside clinical support counselors that are in all of our buildings. They are in elementary, middle, and high school supporting our students. They're working with students one-on-one. They are working with that IEP team. They are helping with that special design instruction in the IEP. They are working with the staff, again, to support the student. And then we have Lakeside Mobile Support. That is where we have counselors and professional academic tutors going into our home to support some of our students with some mental health challenges, students that have needed modified schedules, students that have needed modified work. They are meeting these students in the home, working with the families on strategies to improve attendance and to improve some of the anxiety provoking needs that our students have. And again, the goal is to bring them back into our building as much as possible. And the Lakeside Mobile Support, again, works with our IEP teams. They're attending our IEP meetings. I'm the liaison between Lakeside and our school district. So I've been able to meet a lot of our therapists and tutors, and we've developed a really good relationship with them. And we're very fortunate that we have them in the district as a support. And again, we have our outside vendors, our behavior specialists, again, that will focus on specific behavioral needs, will assist with behavior plans, assist with writing the IEP goals, and giving input to support you and your student. Next slide. So further supports that we have academic, we have it split up between elementary and secondary. So at the elementary level, we have implemented our MTSS, our multi-tiered system of supports. This is a level of support that's given to all of our students before we start identifying them for special education services. We're looking at our curriculums, we're looking at our supports to see what extra assistance they may need throughout their school day if we're noticing any needs. We have our I&E time. If you're familiar with our elementary level, that is a time throughout the day that is allotted just for some remediation, some direct instruction, some time to work with the learning support teachers or the regular education teachers to work on those IEP goals. Often a special education teacher can meet with their students and do that progress monitoring to understand how their goals are being implemented throughout the day and also tracked. We also have our reading specialists. As you know, we have our instructional support, our instructional technology support. That has been really helpful, again, during our COVID year, helping our elementary parents and students, navigate Schoology and all these online platforms, and also giving specific strategies to our teachers in the classroom. We also have our direct instruction time. If some of our students need more support with the curriculums if they need some remedial time. We have various reading programs to support our students with literacy needs. We may have students that have really solid comprehension skills, but they need direct instruction, or they need a program that's just going to focus on the phonemic awareness and the fluency. We have our online supplemental resources that we talked about earlier. One that we started this year was called Spring Math. It's been a really great program. It's been able to assess our students, give us a baseline, and then track their growth if they need any supplemental work. I was able to go into a classroom over at Radnor Elementary School and see the students. It was a 20-minute lesson. It was something given to them every day, and it worked on the IEP goals that they have in terms of math. And it was really neat to see the kids do the routine, and then they were able to see their growth through the graphs and the tracking. So it really gave them a lot of ownership. And again, we have our progress monitoring tools to track our growth and help us to write our IEPs and report data to you as the parent, to know where your child is and know how they are progressing throughout the school year. At the secondary level, we have direct instruction to meet our needs, to meet our student needs. So we have a direct instruction for reading, for math, for writing, and then even our social emotional. We have our leveled curriculum supports throughout the 9th through 12th grade. As you know, if you have a secondary student, you are doing course selection every winter to get ready for the next school year. And again, that can be embedded within the IEP team as well, looking at if they need a higher level of class, if they need to move down to a level, or what modifications we may need. They have an instructional support coach at the secondary level, again, supporting through the curriculum and the classroom. We have the technology support. We also have structured study halls where the students are earning a pass or fail grade, where they are coming into the study hall. It is a time for them to work, but it's also a time for them to meet with their teacher, look over home access center, look at Schoology, and plan and learn those time management skills. We also have a structured study hall called Academic Success Center that teaches specific executive functioning skills, but still allows them to have a study hall time. We also have our school counseling that supports our students with transition. As you know, in the IEP, once a student turns 14, we are required to document and to start planning for them, both academically, post-secondary, independent living, and employment, and look at where their needs are and how to address them within the IEP. We will be starting, the students start talking about, what they want to be when they grow up at an early age, and we start to do different activities throughout, K to 12, but really at the secondary level, we're looking at that. We also have a transition coordinator at the high school that supports our families and our students with outside community supports for more complex needs. We also have our writing and math centers. They are offered to all of our students. They are managed or overseen by a certified English and math teacher throughout the day. They are drop-in centers that the students may utilize when they have downtime and can get that extra support. And then the secondary level has the extended learning program, our after-school tutoring. This year, they were able to do it in person, I believe, but I know they definitely had the virtual platform that allowed students to stay after school and work with our teachers with any academic tutoring that they may need. What's nice about the virtual platform this year is that it's later hours. So it's really nice for our students that have activities at the end of the day, they can drop in and have a Zoom session.
Thank you, Kara.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so moving ahead, I'm going to wrap it up and have a request for participants who are live. Moving ahead, we have many goals in the department. I hope tonight was just a glimpse of the available supports and services for your students and how we can include them meaningfully in the regular education classroom. Like I said, we are very proud at how much we can include them, but it's not without all the special supports and services that we have, the aids and services that we have. So moving ahead, professional development is of utmost importance. There was a variety of programs that we had anticipated implementing, moved ahead with expanding our continuum of programs in the district, but we're not able to train all of the staff this year due to COVID. So that is a priority for this summer and moving into the fall making sure that we continue to focus on that professional development. There was a question in the chat box, and I appreciate that, and we will definitely get back to you on any professional development in that area or who may be trained in that area already. Teacher support, as Kara mentioned, it is really crucial that as the case manager support your students, that we as a department support our teachers, and that goes for both regular education and special education teachers. And that is, again, with a lot of individual meetings, team meetings, and support through some of our consultants that we have. We are going to continue to look at our programs in the district and expand as needed. We've spent a lot of time the past 2 years trying to align our programs K-12. We met with our special education department a few times formally to look at that backwards design and look at the skills that the students need in elementary in order for them to be successful up at the high school. And it was an eye-opening experience, and we moved ahead then with aligning some of those programs K-12, which you heard some of tonight. Along with that is MTSS, multi-tiered system of supports, which you will hear more of as we continue to expand that framework and begin our formal implementation this coming fall. And that does have an impact on special education. So we'll be excited to share more about that. Mental health and SEL support and programming is of utmost importance. It always was a focus of Jenny and mine as we moved into before COVID, into the school year before COVID, but especially as COVID hit and throughout COVID, and as you're well aware, the social emotional needs of our students has expanded. So we want to continue to look at programming and expand as needed. We are really looking now at tier 1 supports, so that would be supports that all teachers would be implementing in the classroom to make sure that their students are getting those skills taught to them. Transition support program, continuing to expand on the opportunities at the secondary level for students post-Radnor, post-secondary, and what we need to do in order for them to get there with those goals, how they can accomplish those goals. And then lastly, we do need to continue to review learning loss and the impact of COVID. That is a top priority of ours. We have been doing that throughout this year, as you are aware, with the requirements that PDE put on us to look at learning loss specific to special education students, but now more broadly working with the teaching and learning department to look at learning loss and how we can mitigate some of that as we move into the fall, the next school year. Right? Now, before we end, I'm just going to stop the recording, and then we have a request. So give me 1 second.